The desert does not whisper warnings. It waits. The sun was already sinking when Elias Rourke saw the shoe, half buried in the sand. Small, torn at the heel, pink once, maybe, now the color of dust and abandonment. Elias stopped his truck. So abruptly the engine coughed in protest. The tires sank slightly into the loose sand, as if the earth itself were trying to pull him in. "No," he muttered, gripping the steering wheel. "No, no, no." He had driven this stretch of desert dozens of times, hauling water tanks, medical crates, supplies for border villages no one remembered until tragedy struck. He knew the signs, knew them too well. A shoe meant a body. Or worse, meant someone who hadn't made it yet. The wind cut across the open land, carrying heat and silence. Elias stepped out, boots crunching against gravel and bone-dry soil. His shadow stretched long and thin, like it wanted to run before he did. "Hello," he called, his voice swallowed by the open nothingness. No answer. He crouched and picked up the shoe. It was lighter than it should have been. Too light, like it had belonged to someone whose life hadn't yet filled it. A sound drifted toward him. Not the wind. A cough. Elias froze. Another sound followed. Thin, cracked, desperate. A child. His pulse slammed at his ears as he scanned the dunes. "Hey!" he shouted now louder. "I hear you. Don't move." The cough came again. Closer. Then crying. Multiple voices layered together, like echoes of fear colliding. Elias broke into a run. The sand fought him with every step, dragging him back, but he pushed forward until the landscape dipped into a shallow ravine. And there, curled against a rock formation as if the stone itself were their last protector, were 4 children. 4. They were huddled together, skeletal arms wrapped around each other, eyes too big for their faces, lips cracked and bleeding, skin burned dark from the sun. One of them wasn't moving. Oh, God! Elias breathed, dropping to his knees. A boy, maybe 10, lifted his head. His eyes locked onto Elias with a mix of terror and fragile hope. "Please," the boy whispered, "don't leave us." Elias's chest tightened so hard he thought his ribs would break. "I'm not leaving," he said immediately. "I swear, I'm here." The smallest child, a girl no older than 5, clutched the unmoving one. "She won't wake up," she said. "We tried." Elias reached out carefully, checking the older girl's neck. A pulse. Weak. But there. "She's alive," Elias said. "Barely, but she's alive." The boy's shoulders collapsed as he exhaled a sob that sounded older than his years. Elias moved fast. Training kicked in. Water first, but slowly, small sips, shaved from his jacket. Emergency electrolytes crushed and mixed. His hands trembled despite himself. "Names," he said gently. "I need names." "I'm Samir," the boy said. "This is Lena, and Yusuf, and Amara." Amara, the girl who wasn't waking up. "How long have you been out here?" Elias asked. Samir hesitated, eyes darting to the horizon like it might punish him for speaking. 2 days, he said finally. "Maybe 3. Elias swallowed hard. No adult could survive that long without water. Children? It was a miracle they were breathing. "Where are your parents?" Elias asked softly. Samir's jaw clenched. "They put us in a truck," he said. "They said it was safer, that we would meet them on the other side." Lena's voice cracked. The men stopped. "They told us to get out. They took the water." Yusuf added, barely audible, "They said we were too much weight." The desert went silent again. Elias felt something inside him fracture. He'd heard stories. Smugglers abandoning families. Children used as cargo, then discarded when inconvenient. But standing here, seeing the sun burn truth into their skin, it was different. This wasn't a story. This was a crime still breathing. Elias lifted Amara carefully into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. "We're leaving," he said. "All of you. Right now." Samir looked at him, eyes searching. "You promise?" Elias met his gaze. "With my life." The truck sped across the desert. suspension rattling as Elias pushed the engine harder than he ever had. He kept glancing at the rear-view mirror where the children sat wrapped in blankets, eyes wide at the movement, the noise, the idea of escape. Amara stirred once, a faint groan slipping past her lips. "Easy," Elias said, glancing back. "Hospital's coming." But fear gnawed at him. The nearest clinic was over an hour away, and something else bothered him. Something colder than the desert night creeping in. He had found them too easily. This route was controlled. Watched. Nothing happened here by accident. His radio crackled. "Rourke," a voice said, "didn't expect to hear from you today." Elias stiffened. He recognized the voice. Marcus Hale, private security contractor. Too many men. Too much influence. Too clean hands for dirty work. "What do you want, Hale?" Elias replied. "Just checking in," Hale said smoothly. "You're a little off route." Elias's grip tightened on the wheel. "Truck trouble." A pause. "Funny," Hale said, "because my guys reported movement near Ravine 12. Elias's heart dropped. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you," Hale continued. "Turn around." Samir leaned forward, listening, fear blooming in his eyes. Elias lowered his voice. "These are children." "They're assets," Hale corrected. "And they're expensive." Elias's jaw hardened. "I'm not bringing them back." Another pause. Longer this time. "Then you're making this very difficult," Hale said. "For yourself. And for them." The radio went dead. Elias slammed it down, adrenaline flooding his veins. "They're coming," he muttered. "What?" Lena asked. Elias looked at the road ahead. Empty, endless, unforgiving. "Hold on," he said. "Whatever happens, don't let go of each other." In the distance, dust clouds rose. Multiple vehicles. Closing fast. And as the desert swallowed the last trace of daylight, Elias realized something terrifying. Saving these children might cost him everything, and he wasn't sure he'd survive long enough to find out. The headlights appeared first. Twin pairs. Then 4. Then more. White beams cutting to the falling darkness like blades searching for flesh. Elias pushed the accelerator harder, the engine screaming in protest as the truck bounced violently over uneven ground. The speedometer climbed, then wavered, then dipped again as the sand thickened. "Why are they chasing us?" Lena asked from the back, her small fingers gripping the edge of the seat. Elias didn't answer right away. He couldn't, because if he spoke, he might tell the truth too plainly. Because the truth was this: people who abandoned children in the desert did not chase them afterward, unless those children were worth more than their lives. "They want to take you somewhere bad," Elias said finally, "and I won't let that happen." Samir swallowed. "They won't stop, will they?" "No," Elias replied. "They won't." The radio crackled again. "Rourke," Marcus Hale's voice returned, calmer now, almost friendly. "You're forcing our hand." Elias grabbed the mic. "You already played your hand when you left them to die." A chuckle slipped through the static. "You're emotional. That makes people careless." "Then you should be worried." Elias shot back. "Because I'm done being careful." He killed the radio and flung it aside. "What are we going to do?" Yusuf asked, his voice barely louder than the rattle of the truck. Elias scanned the horizon. He knew this desert like scars on his skin. He had buried friends here. Had nearly died here himself years ago. Left behind after a convoy betrayal that no one was ever punished for. That memory burned now. "We're not outrunning them," Elias said, "so we're disappearing." He yanked the wheel hard to the left. The truck veered sharply off the main track, plunging into rough terrain where dunes rose like frozen waves. The children screamed as the vehicle jolted violently. "Hold on," Elias shouted. The headlights behind them hesitated. One vehicle slowed. Another surged forward. "They know this land too," Elias muttered. The engine sputtered. "No, no, no, come on," he whispered, slamming his palm against the dashboard. The truck lurched again, then steadied, but the warning light flickered red. Samir leaned forward. "Is it going to stop?" "Not yet," Elias said, "but soon." That was the problem. He needed time, and distance, and something Hale didn't expect. Elias spotted it just as the moon rose higher, a narrow rock passage slicing between two jagged ridges. The Devil's Cut. Most people avoided it. Too narrow, too easy to trap. But Hale's vehicles were bigger, heavier, built for intimidation, not finesse. Elias aimed straight for it. "Close your eyes if you're scared," he told the children. "But don't let go of each other." The truck screamed as it squeezed through the stone corridor, metal scraping rock, sparks flying like fireflies. Elias winced as the side mirror shattered. Behind them, one of Hale's vehicles tried to follow. It got stuck. The sound of grinding steel echoed through the night. But two others split off, circling wide. "They're cutting us off," Elias growled. The passage spat them out onto a plateau, overlooking a vast drop. Elias slammed the brakes. The children cried out as the truck skidded sideways, stopping inches from the edge. The desert stretched below, dark, endless, waiting. Elias turned to face them. "I need you to listen to me very carefully," he said, voice steady despite the chaos pounding in his chest. "When I say run, you run toward those rocks." He pointed to a cluster of boulders half hidden by shadow. "You don't stop. You don't look back." Samir shook his head violently. "What about you?" Elias hesitated. "I'll slow them down." "No," Samir said, his voice rising. "You promised." Elias crouched in front of him, gripping his shoulders. "And I am keeping that promise. This is how." The sound of engines roared closer. Elias stood, pulling a flare from the emergency kit. "When I throw this," he said, "you go." The first vehicle crested the ridge. Headlights blinded them. "Now!" Elias shouted. He hurled the flare into the darkness. It exploded into red fire, lighting the plateau like a warning from heaven. The children ran. Elias turned back toward the truck, just as a door slammed open and boots hit the ground. "Rourke!" Hale's voice called out, amplified. "Step away from a vehicle." Elias didn't. He reached into the cab and pulled out a metal case, one Hale hadn't seen before. Inside were documents. Photos, coordinates, names, proof. Hale froze when he saw it. "You really want to do this?" Hale said, "You don't understand who you're protecting." "I understand exactly," Elias replied. "You sell people. You discard children. You erase evidence." Hale's smile vanished. "You think that box saves you?" "No," Elias said calmly. "It saves them." He smashed the case open and flung the contents into the wind. Paper scattered like birds. Hale shouted orders. Men scrambled, trying to grab what they could, but the desert took it. Pages tumbling into ravines, photos vanishing into darkness. Hale lunged forward. Elias swung first. The punch cracked across Hale's jaw, snapping his head sideways. Shock flashed across Hale's face. He hadn't expected resistance. They grappled, boots sliding on gravel, fists landing hard and ugly. "You're dead," Hale snarled. "You know that, right?" Elias drove his elbow into Hale's ribs. "So are your secrets." A gunshot rang out. Pain exploded in Elias's shoulder. He stumbled back, gasping, the world tilting violently. Hale steadied himself, gun raised. "You should have stayed out of it," Hale said coldly. Behind Elias, a small voice screamed, "Stop." Samir stood at the edge of the rocks, holding Amara in his arms, Lena and Yusuf beside him. Hale's eyes flicked toward them. Something dangerous shifted in his expression. Elias stepped in front of the children without thinking, blood soaking his sleeve. "If you touch them," Elias said, his voice shaking but unbroken, "the world will know what you are." Hale laughed. "You really believe that?" he asked. Then the desert answered for Elias. Sirens, distant, faint, but unmistakable. Hale froze. Elias smiled through pain. "You weren't the only one watching," he said. Hale's men scrambled, shouting into radios. Hale backed away slowly, eyes burning into Elias like a promise of vengeance. "This isn't over," Hale said. "You've made powerful enemies." Elias sank to his knees as the adrenaline drained away. The children rushed him, clinging, crying. But as the sirens grew closer, Elias looked past them, toward the dark horizon where Hale disappeared, because he knew the truth. Tonight, they had survived, but Hale would come back, and next time he wouldn't miss. The sirens never sounded close enough to feel real. They hovered at the edge of the night, like a promise that might still be broken. Elias drifted in and out of consciousness as the desert shifted beneath him, rough hands lifting him, voices overlapping, the sharp sting of antiseptic, the taste of dust and blood clinging to the back of his throat. Stay with me. Pressure here. Don't let go. He's losing too much blood. Through the blur, Elias heard Samir's voice. Please, the boy kept saying. Please don't let him die. He saved us. That was the last thing Elias remembered before darkness swallowed him whole. When Elias woke, the first thing he noticed was the ceiling. White, cracked, buzzing softly with a dying fluorescent light. The second thing he noticed was pain. It radiated from his shoulder in hot, pulsing waves, every breath dragging it awake again. He tried to move and hissed sharply. You're awake. The voice was calm. Female. Steady. Elias turned his head slowly. A woman in a worn medical coat stood beside the bed, clipboard tucked under her arm. Her eyes were sharp, tired, and kind the way only people who had seen too much could manage. You're lucky, she said. Another inch, and that bullet would have torn through your lung. Lucky's not the word I'd use, Elias muttered. She allowed herself a small smile. You're in a clinic, border relief station. We stabilized you and transferred the children as soon as we could. His eyes snapped open wider. The kids. Where are they? Alive, she said immediately. Dehydrated, malnourished, scared, but alive. Elias exhaled shakily. They're asking for you, she added, especially the oldest boy. Samir, can I see them? Soon, she said, after I make sure you don't do something stupid, which I can already tell is unlikely. Elias chuckled weakly, then winced. What happened to Hale? He asked. The doctor's expression darkened. He disappeared. Elias closed his eyes. Of course he did. 2 hours later, Elias sat propped up in a chair, his arm immobilized, his shirt replaced by a hospital gown that felt far too thin against the weight of everything pressing down on him. The door creaked open. For small figures stepped inside. Samir entered first, hesitant. Eyes scanning Elias like he might vanish if stared too hard. Lena clutched Yusuf's hand, while Yusuf held Amara, now wrapped in clean clothes, her eyes open but wary. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Samir crossed the room in 3 long steps and threw his arms around Elias's waist. Elias sucked in a breath, careful of his shoulder, and rested his good hand on the boy's back. You didn't run, Samir said into his chest. You said to run, but you didn't. Elias swallowed. Someone had to make sure you made it. Lena stepped closer, her voice trembling. Are you going to leave us now? The question hit harder than the bullet. Elias looked at their faces, etched with fear, hope dangling by threads that could snap at any moment. No, he said quietly. I'm not leaving. Samir pulled back. They'll come again. The man with the gun. Yes, Elias admitted. He will. Fear flickered across their faces. But, Elias continued, meeting Samir's gaze, this time we won't be running blind. 3 days later, Elias was discharged, against medical advice. The clinic staff argued, threatened, pleaded. Elias thanked them, promised a rest, and walked out anyway, because resting was a luxury he no longer had. The children were placed temporarily under the care of a humanitarian shelter in the nearby town. Paperwork moved slowly. Too slowly. Elias sat across from a government official in a windowless office, the air thick with bureaucracy and indifference. You don't have legal guardianship, the official said, flipping through files. And there's no record of their parents' status. They were trafficked, Elias said flatly. Abandoned. Allegedly. Elias leaned forward. I have proof. The official raised an eyebrow. You destroyed it. Not all of it, Elias said. And what I didn't destroy, others already have. That caught the man's attention. Others. Elias stood. Ask yourself why Hale vanished so fast. That night, Elias sat alone in a cheap motel room, laptop open, shoulder throbbing, the hum of the air conditioner barely cutting through the noise in his head. He clicked open an encrypted folder. Inside were copies, digital backups he had uploaded months ago, insurance against the day someone decided he knew too much, transaction logs, GPS routes, satellite images, faces, names. Marcus Hale was just one head of a hydra, and cutting one had only made the others angry. Elias's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He stared at it, then answered. You're persistent, a voice said. Not Hale. Older. Colder. You've caused a great deal of inconvenience, the voice continued. Men like you confuse chaos with justice. Elias leaned back slowly. Men like you confuse silence with innocence. A pause. You should take the money, the voice said. Disappear. Let the children vanish into the system. It's kinder. Elias laughed. A bitter, broken sound. Kinder than leaving them to die? Kinder than what's coming. The call ended. Elias stared at the screen as his phone buzzed again. This time it was a text. A photo loaded slowly. 4 children, sleeping, taken from across the street. The timestamp read 10 minutes ago. Elias's blood ran cold. He was already on his feet when the knock came. Soft, polite, 3 taps. Elias reached for the door, then stopped. Another knock. Mr. Rourke. A voice called gently. We need to talk. Elias glanced at the window, saw shadows moving outside. Too many. He opened the door. 2 men stood there. Suits. No insignia. Eyes that measured value in outcomes, not lives. You're being invited to cooperate, one said, for the sake of the children. Elias clenched his jaw. And if I refuse? The man smiled thinly. Then the desert will finish what it started. Elias looked past them, at the parking lot, at the darkness pooling under flickering lights. He thought of Samir's arms around him, Lena's question, Amara's fragile breath. He stepped aside. Come in, Elias said. As the door closed behind them, Elias knew one thing with terrifying clarity. Saving the children once had been a miracle. Saving them again would require war. The men did not sit. They stood in the center of the motel room like they owned the air, the walls, the future. One leaned casually against the dresser, fingers brushing the edge as if testing its weight. The other remained upright, hands folded, eyes locked on Elias with professional patience. You're making this harder than it needs to be, the taller one said. His voice carried the calm of someone used to watching resistance collapse. We prefer cooperation. Elias closed the door behind them and rested his back against it. His shoulder throbbed, but he welcomed the pain. It kept him sharp. You already took pictures of the children, Elias said. Threaten them. Threaten me. That's not cooperation. That's leverage, the shorter man replied. A necessary language. Elias laughed quietly. Funny thing about leverage. It only works if the other side believes you won't break the whole table. The taller man smiled faintly. You're not in a position to bluff. No, Elias agreed, but you are. The room fell silent. The shorter man tilted his head. Explain. Elias pushed himself off the door and walked slowly toward the table. Careful not to rush, careful not to show weakness. He opened his laptop and turned it toward them. On the screen was a live upload interface. A timer, counting down. What's that? The taller man asked, though his eyes had already narrowed. That, Elias said, is an automatic data release. 47 encrypted packets, financial records, video footage, location histories, everything tying your organization to trafficking routes, shell companies, and mass disappearances. The shorter man's jaw tightened. You don't have that. Elias clicked once. The screen filled with names. Not just Hales, government contractors, border officials, corporate donors, people who shook hands on camera and washed blood off in private. You do not touch the children, Elias said evenly. You do not touch me, and you walk away. And if we don't, the taller man asked. Elias glanced at the timer. Then the truth goes everywhere. The taller man exhaled slowly. You're forcing escalation. You escalated when you left children in the desert. Elias shot back. Another silence, this one heavier. The shorter man stepped closer. You think exposure ends this? It doesn't. It just changes the shape of the violence. Elias met his gaze. Good. Because sunlight is the only thing that makes monsters run. The taller man checked his watch. You've got courage. I'll give you that. He turned toward the door. This conversation isn't over, he said. But tonight you win. They left without another word. Elias waited until their footsteps faded before his legs finally gave out. He collapsed onto the edge of the bed, breath ragged, sweat cold on his skin. The timer still ticked. He didn't stop it. He reduced it from 48 hours to 6. The next morning, the city woke up screaming. News alerts exploded across screens. Social media ignited. Whistleblower files surfaced like bones after a flood. Names trended. Arrests followed. And somewhere in the chaos, Marcus Hale resurfaced, not in handcuffs, on camera. He stood behind a podium, clean suit, flawless smile, eyes hard as glass. This is a coordinated misinformation attack, Hale said, a desperate attempt by criminals to discredit legitimate security operations. Elias watched the broadcast from a diner across the street from the shelter where the children were being housed. His coffee sat untouched. Samir sat across from him, staring at the screen. He's lying, Samir said quietly. Yes, Elias replied, but lies can still hurt people. Will they believe him? Elias didn't answer, because he didn't know. That night, the shelter lost power. No storm, no warning, just darkness. Elias was already on his feet when the first scream cut through the hallway. Lock the doors, someone shouted. Too late. Glass shattered. Boots thundered. Elias grabbed Samir and shoved him behind a heavy desk. Stay down, he ordered. No matter what. What about Lena? Samir cried. Elias turned, just in time to see two men grab Lena and Yusuf. Hey! Elias roared, charging forward. A fist slammed into his ribs, knocking the air from his lungs. He staggered but kept moving, tackling one of the men into a wall. Gunshots cracked. People screamed. Smoke filled the room. Through the chaos, Elias saw Hale step through the broken doorway, like a man arriving late to dinner. You should have stopped, Hale said calmly. This could have been quiet. Elias dragged himself upright, blood on his lips. Let them go. Hale glanced at the children struggling in his men's arms. Their insurance. Always were. Samir ran from hiding. Stop, he screamed, planting himself in front of Hale. You're not taking them. The room froze. Hale looked down at him, curious, almost amused. Elias's heart stopped. Hale crouched. You're brave, he said softly. But bravery doesn't stop bullets. Elias lunged. Too slow. The gun rose. A shot rang out. Samir screamed, and the light snapped back on. Red and blue flooded the room. Drop the weapon. Armed officers poured in from every direction. Hale froze, gun still raised. The moment stretched, one breath away from irreversible loss. Hale smiled at Elias. You think this ends with me? He whispered. Then he turned the gun on himself, not to fire, but to throw it. Chaos erupted. Smoke. Shouts. Bodies colliding. In confusion, Hale vanished again. When the noise finally died down, Elias found Samir shaking but unharmed. Lena and Yusuf sobbing in the corner, alive. Alive. But Hale was gone. Again, an officer approached Elias. We've got warrants. Task forces mobilized. But he slipped through. Elias nodded slowly, exhaustion crashing over him. This wasn't over. Not even close. That night, as the children slept under armed protection, Elias stood alone outside the shelter, staring at the stars. He knew Hale would make one final move, and next time, he wouldn't miss. The desert remembered everything. It remembered the footsteps of children abandoned under a merciless sun. It remembered the blood that soaked into its sand and vanished without witnesses. And now, it remembered Marcus Hale. Elias felt it as he drove through the night, the way the air thickened, the way silence pressed harder the farther he went. Hale had sent the message an hour earlier. No words, just coordinates. The same desert, the same ravine, the place where this nightmare had begun. Samir's face haunted Elias as the headlights carved a narrow path through the darkness. The boy had tried to be brave when Elias told him he had to leave for a few hours. Had tried to be strong for Lena and Yusuf and Amara. You always come back, Samir had said, like it was a rule of the universe. Elias gripped the steering wheel tighter. I will, he had promised. This time, it wasn't just a promise. It was a reckoning. Hale stood alone near the ravine when Elias arrived. No convoy, no soldiers, no cameras, just two men and the desert that had watched everything. You came, Hale said, hands loose at his sides, voice calm. I was beginning to think you'd learned. Elias stepped out of the truck. The night wind cut across his face, carrying sand and memory. I learned, Elias replied, that men like you only understand endings. Hale smiled. You still think this is about the children. It always was. Hale shook his head. No, this is about control, about who decides who matters. Elias took a slow step forward. You left them to die. And you saved them, Hale said, which makes you dangerous. Miracles inspire people. Elias laughed once, sharp and humorless. You don't believe in miracles. I believe in outcomes. Hale gestured toward the ravine. This ends here. No witnesses. No uploads. No heroes. Elias met his gaze. You're wrong. Hale frowned. About what? You already lost. Elias said. You just don't know it yet. Hale's eyes flicked briefly toward the darkness. You came alone. Elias didn't respond. Hale sighed. Pity? He reached for his gun. He never drew it. Lights exploded across the desert. Engines roared. Voices thundered from every direction. Drop your weapon. Hale spun, disbelief flashing across his face as law enforcement vehicles surrounded them. Federal agents, Border Patrol, international task forces. Red and blue lights painted the sand like a warning from the sky. Hale looked back at Elias slowly. You set me up, he said. Elias nodded. The desert remembered. Hale laughed, loud and hollow. You think this is justice? No, Elias said quietly. This is accountability. Hale raised his hands as agents closed in, cuffs snapping around his wrists. For the first time, his confidence cracked. As they dragged him away, Hale leaned toward Elias one last time. You saved 4 children, Hale said. But how many others didn't you save? Elias met his eyes. Enough to make this worth it. The trials lasted months. The truth poured out like flood water once the dam broke. Networks collapsed. Officials resigned. Some went to prison. Others disappeared into history's footnotes, stripped of power and name. Elias testified until his voice went hoarse. He never once softened the truth. And when it was over, when the cameras turned away and the world moved on to its next outrage, Elias returned to the shelter. Samir was waiting. The boy ran full speed into Elias's arms, nearly knocking the breath from him. You came back, Samir said, his voice breaking. I told you, Elias replied, holding him tight. I always do. Lena smiled wider than Elias had ever seen. Yusuf waved proudly with drawing clutched in his hand. Amara toddled forward, steady now, alive in a way that felt impossible months ago. They're asking about guardianship, the shelter director said quietly. About permanent placement. Elias looked down at the 4 of them. Good, he said, because I already know my answer. The desert bloomed that spring. It wasn't dramatic. Just small things. Wildflowers pushing through cracks. Green daring to exist where nothing should have survived. Elias stood at the edge of the ravine one last time. Samir beside him. Do you hate this place? Samir asked. Elias thought for a long moment. No, he said. It showed us who people really are. Samir nodded. And who we can become. Elias smiled. They turned and walked away together. Behind them, the desert remained silent, vast, and watchful. But this time, it held a different story. Not of abandonment, not of cruelty, but of 4 children who survived the impossible, of a man who refused to look away, and of a miracle born not from chance, but from choosing to stand when the world expected silence.